What's going on, guys? So today I'm going to do another director tier list, and I'm going to rank every single one of Tim Burton's films. I've done this tier list so far with a few directors, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Sam Raimi, and I was trying to think of another one to do that would be fun. And then I remembered how many bangers that Tim Burton put out in a row, at least in the 90s. Just great film after great film after great film. And then there's a pretty steep drop-off that I'll get into here with a few gems kind of here or there after a certain point in time in his career. But I thought this would be a good one to do because Tim Burton has a lot of interesting films to talk about, whether or not you love or hate him. He definitely has his own signature style, but he has kind of stepped outside of that box a few times within his career too, which I think is cool and interesting when he does so. Also, he does have Beetlejuice 2, or I guess it's technically titled Beetlejuice, coming out in a few months, which is crazy. Never thought that movie would see the light of day. That's one of those movies that is announced every couple of years. Like, I remember there was Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii or Beetlejuice 2, announced like 15 years ago, and it never happened. So the fact that it is happening and it's a real movie and it's actually coming out kind of blows my mind, along with the fact that I am a huge fan of the original Beetlejuice. So like, I'm crossing my fingers and I really hope that it's good. So anyways, Tim Burton will be topical here in a few months, whether or not that movie is good or just bombs completely. So regardless, we're going to go through his whole filmography and rank them from best to worst. But how I do these rankings is with a tier list, and I go from the first movie that they put out all through their career. And I actually just watched through all of these Tim Burton movies over the past 3 weeks. And I didn't expect it to take me that long, actually. I didn't realize just how many movies are in his filmography. He has 19 theatrically released films that he directed. And that's what this tier list is also, films that he directed, because you'll probably notice a glaring omission here. And of course, that is The Nightmare Before Christmas. And Tim Burton, although he came up with the story and it is credited as Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, he did not direct that movie. Henry Selick was the director, and Tim Burton is mostly credited with producing and creating the story. So I'm not including Nightmare Before Christmas, regardless of how associated it is with Tim Burton. I feel like it's one of those things that I feel like most people know at this point that Tim Burton didn't direct Nightmare Before Christmas. Henry Selick did. He also did Coraline and a couple other good animated movies. But if you guys are curious, I'll just get it out of the way. If Nightmare Before Christmas was on this list, it would be at the top in the masterpiece category. Okay, so I'll just get that out of the way right off the bat. Yes, theatrically released directed films by Tim Burton, and my categories are masterpiece, great movie, decent, and ass. And basically how I quantify this is masterpiece are movies that I think are basically the defining films of this director. There are virtually no flaws whatsoever, and it's a movie that I think stands the test of time, and it's just an overall great film in all aspects, beyond just directing, in the screenplay and the acting and the cinematography, and everything is just a masterpiece. Great movie is a step down from that, where you can nitpick some things about the film and maybe it's not perfect, but overall it's a great movie. It's a good experience. You'll enjoy watching it, and it just pretty much overall just a good film, right? Decent is right in the middle, where it's all right. It's good here and there, but it's got some flaws that are kind of hard to ignore. It's all right. Maybe a movie I wouldn't rewatch all the time, but if I saw it like once every 5 years, I'd be like, all right, fine. It's a decent movie to watch. Is the category where it starts to get bad, where there might be a few redeeming qualities, but overall the film is just kind of a mess. It's kind of all over the place. It's just kind of hard to defend unless you're like a hardcore fan. To me, that's just kind of the category of subpar, I guess. And then the final category of ass is just, it's really hard to find anything I like about this film, and pretty much I just despise it. It's a category for movies that I just straight up am not a fan of whatsoever, and if not for rewatching all of these films to make this video, I would never watch and probably never will watch again. So those are all of our categories. And of course, before I start, I do have to state that these are based upon my opinions and my preferences when it comes to films. This is not meant to be an objective list. This is not meant to be anybody else's list except mine. So these are just purely my personal opinions, and I'm not going by any kind of rating or ranking or Rotten Tomatoes or any other kind of rating system. This is just purely the real life Ryan rating system for these movies, and I'm sure my list will look different than your list. So go ahead, if you want to, you can put your list down in the comments below, or put your top 5, top 3, whatever you guys want to do. So starting off with Tim Burton's first movie, which is Pee-wee's Big Adventure. What a first film, my God. They gave him a chance, they gave him an opportunity, they gave him Pee-wee, and he took it and ran with it. And after rewatching this movie a few weeks ago when I started this, it does not hit the same way as it did when I was a kid. So I did watch Pee-wee's Playhouse, when I was a kid, and enjoyed it for the silly antics and the wackiness. And Pee-wee's Big Adventure was something I watched, adjacently to that. But the thing that always bothered me about the movie is I don't understand if it takes place in the same universe as the TV show, because none of the other characters are there, and he doesn't live in the same house, and it's just a completely different thing. But it's Pee-wee living separately. Like, there's no Cherry, there's no Cowboy Curtis. Where are the other characters? I don't know. And there are still moments in it that make me laugh even as an adult. Also, I know a lot of people say that they were freaked out by the Large Marge sequence, like it scared them when they were a kid. I was never scared by that scene. I was scared by the weird dream sequence with the clowns. And also, clowns are something that show up in Tim Burton films all the time, even when they don't even need to be there, like in Batman Returns. Like, why are all the Penguin's minions clowns? I don't know. I think Tim Burton just likes clowns. But that scene always freaked me out. But yeah, having said that, rewatching it as an adult, I gotta say it doesn't hit the same way, and there were some moments that were definitely grating on me. Nothing against Paul Reubens, of course. The role is iconic, right? Pee-wee is definitely earned his spot in movie and TV and film history and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, watching it over as an adult, I think it's just okay. Like, it's not a film that I would probably watch ever again at this point in my life, unless I was probably just hanging out with some friends and we were having some drinks and just wanted to put on something ridiculous. But I think overall I have to put it in the category. I mean, I know nostalgia will play a huge role for a lot of this list, and I'm sure I'm going to have some massively controversial takes as the video goes on. But for me, after just rewatching Pee-wee a couple weeks ago, it doesn't work the same way. But I will say, pretty stoked that Tim Burton found a way to put Godzilla and Ghidorah into this movie. But now things get real, because look at this run. Look at this next run of films. Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, Ed Wood, Mars Attacks, and Sleepy Hollow, one after the other. And that's what I was talking about. Just there's this era of like the 80s and 90s where Tim Burton just put out banger after banger after banger. Like, that is an insane run of films, and I'm super excited to talk about it. But then after that, things start to drop up. I would say the first half and the second half of his career are very distinctly different in my mind, but this run of films is crazy, man. This is a crazy run of films. Beetlejuice for me is going to go up in masterpiece. I love Beetlejuice, always have since I was a little kid. I am excited for Beetlejuice 2, although I'm pretty nervous about it. Like, that's its own thing. But Beetlejuice, I love the originality of it. I love the fun of it. It is just kind of this whimsical gothic insanity going from start to finish, where you have this couple that passes away, winds up in their house finding this book for the recently deceased, can't leave their house because they're attacked by giant stop-motion sandworms. I think Beetlejuice is hilarious. I love the effects work in it. I love the stop-motion, the Beetlejuice snake, and all of the other wacky things that they did with this film. Obviously, he did the best that he could with the budget he had, but I think that it worked so well, and I think Beetlejuice is the film where Tim Burton kind of found his identity. Like, he wasn't really able to do too much of the gothic weird stuff with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but with Beetlejuice, it's all in, and it all comes together and is center pointed by Michael Keaton's performance as Beetlejuice, this wacky, over-the-top, like, disgusting, almost insufferable character, but you can't help but love him at the same time. He made his villain his main character and named the movie after the villain. You know, it's like we all love Beetlejuice because he's such a dick, but in the best possible way. Of course, you can't deny the involvement of the composer Danny Elfman, because Tim Burton and Danny Elfman go hand in hand, and Danny Elfman did do the score in Pee-wee's Big Adventure as well, but Beetlejuice's score is so standout, it's so iconic, and it's just something that you remember forever. At least the Beetlejuice, theme is always in my head. Then, of course, they incorporated, other songs in the movie that became very prominent as well. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. This is just a staple film for me. It's something deep from my childhood, so there's a ton of nostalgia, but I legitimately think it's a great movie, and especially with what he had at the time, because later on in his career, he gets really, really heavy in the CGI, like with the gigantic budgets and everything, and I enjoy the simplicity of Beetlejuice as well. I think it's a great story, fun characters, Michael Keaton's out of this world in it, just a masterpiece in every way, in my opinion. And then Tim Burton's third film is Batman, which is crazy when you think about it, because one, superhero movies were not what they are today, back then. This came out in 1989, the year I was born. Like a decade earlier, I know we had Superman, but that's how long it took. Like, that's the point. Like, superhero movies didn't come out all the time like they do now. It literally took an entire decade before they took a chance on another superhero. And the image of Batman at the time was like Adam West, 60s, goofy Batman. So this took the darker approach. And my favorite thing about Tim Burton's Batman movie is the aesthetic. Like, to this day, when I think of Batman, I think of that sort of noir 1930, even though it's supposed to be modern times, but it still looks like the 1930s. Just like how Gotham City looks so fantastical. There's a fantasy element to it that, even though I love the Christopher Nolan movies, but that's more of like the gritty, realistic, we're in like basically Detroit, like an actual city. But I love the fantasy elements of how the Batman movie looks that Tim Burton made, and just with like the steam coming out of the buildings and everything, and just the look of it and the feeling to it, along with Danny Elfman's score, just kind of immerses you into that world. But I also do have to be honest with myself, because this is another huge nostalgia childhood film for me. Both Batman and Batman Returns were movies that I watched over and over and over as a kid. I love them to death because of that. But I do have to look at the movie with a little bit more of a critical lens now as an adult, because I do think it has flaws. I don't like the origin story of the Joker and having him being tied to killing Batman's parents. That was a weird choice that I don't think needs to happen. It works fine for the movie itself, but just as like a Batman fan in general, just a weird decision. Also, the entire origin of the Joker being this gangster that we see as Jack Napier before it happens. I don't really need to see the Joker's origin. I like it kind of being more vague. And also, I'm aware we're dealing with the fact that this was 1989. Superhero movies weren't what they are today. And Tim Burton is not necessarily an action movie director. So some of the action sequences in the film are just not choreographed that well. They're fine for what it is. Like, I'm not bashing the movie or anything, but when I see Batman fight, I want to see Batman really, really kick some ass. And he kicks ass in this movie, but, it's a bit stunted. We've evolved a bit from that time. But at the same time, I still think the movie holds up as a piece of entertainment, and I think it's really, really fun. Like I said, I love the aesthetic. The acting in it is great with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. And, of course, the Danny Elfman Batman score is still the superior, best Batman score. Probably will never be topped. So it's pretty tough for me. I was teetering on masterpiece when I was kind of starting this list, but I think that I can't ignore some of the flaws the movie has, but I still love the movie, so I'm going to put it in the great movie category. The next one up is Edward Scissorhands, which is a defining Tim Burton movie, and this is where, for my list, remember, this is my list, my opinion, I think this is where it's going to start to get a little bit controversial, because a lot of people would say that Edward Scissorhands is one of Tim Burton's best films, and even Tim Burton himself has said that it's his most personal movie. And if you look at Tim Burton's entire catalog, a lot of his films deal with a couple of different themes that show up time and time again, mostly dealing with somebody being an outcast, somebody that doesn't fit in with society, somebody that does things differently than other people, and that heavy judgment that other people give them. Another one of his themes is with science and technology, and also people disregarding that in favor of superstition, like in Sleepy Hollow or Frankenweenie, or even in Edward Scissorhands. I know it's not really science, but like, yeah, you're dealing with a mad scientist, or not a mad scientist, but just Vincent Price living up in a castle, making creations, right? And he creates something that he wasn't able to finish. And so you have this strange being that doesn't really know who he is, doesn't really know how to interact, and he's taken to the world of humanity, which is this sort of perfect, pristine, bright colors, you know, everybody in this little suburbia area. Suburbia pops up time and time again in Tim Burton movies too. I don't know if that's where he grew up, but it feels like it's very similar to a lot of things that happen in his movies. And they're not really sure how to deal with this being of Edward Scissorhands, and he's not really sure how to interact within society, but he does his best, but he's just so weird, so different, so bizarre, that as much as they try to make him fit in, he just can't. And at some point, the entire town turns on him because of it. And here's the thing with me with Edward Scissorhands, is I do think it's a movie that I appreciate, but not a movie that I necessarily enjoy watching all that often. Like, I get what Tim Burton is trying to say with the film, and I appreciate it. And Danny Elfman's score, fucking beautiful, phenomenal. But as a film, sitting there watching it play out, it's never been a movie that I've been drawn too closely to. I don't know why that is. It's just every time I watch it, I feel like I get what he's trying to say. I get the story. I get the themes. But I'm just not really a fan of, like, just watching Edward Scissorhands. There's so many other Tim Burton movies that I would rather watch, or that I would rather put on, or that I get personal, better entertainment value from rather than this movie. It is the first time he collaborated with Johnny Depp, which seems to be the actor he's worked with the most. So it's also, you know, an important piece of his catalog for that. But yeah, it's, for some reason, I've never been drawn to Edward Scissorhands the way that a lot of people are. And I feel like this is going to be my first controversial take, because for me, I'm going to have to put it in the decent category. Yeah, I know. Like, I appreciate it. I appreciate the movie for what it is. And remember, this is just my personal opinion, my personal list, but it's just not a movie that I go back to and rewatch that often. I just, I don't know. I just never been a huge fan of it in comparison to his other movies, you know? Like, I think it's good. Like, I enjoy it for what it is, but it's just not a movie that I come back to time and time again. And, yeah, so I'm just going to put it in decent, but it will probably be the highest in the decent category, okay? So cut me some slack. Next, we get Batman Returns. So after Edward Scissorhands, he went back into the Batman world to make a sequel, and until Beetlejuice 2 is the only sequel that he's ever made. And Batman Returns is another one of those kind of controversial movies. Because the first Batman film did so well financially, they allowed Tim Burton to go full fucking Tim Burton in Batman Returns. And it kind of bit them, at least the studio, it bit them in the ass, because there was a lot of controversy with parents because it was too dark, it was morbid, it was disgusting. You know, they couldn't sell McDonald's toys because of it. Like the whole merchandising and appealing to children kind of thing a little bit went out the window, because the movie is really dark. I mean, at least for the time. It's still a PG-13 rated movie, but you know, you got the Penguin, who's this strange, like, mutated creature played by Danny DeVito, living in the sewer with, like, black goo, you know, spilling out of his mouth, and he's biting people's noses off, and he's, like, being super perverted, saying he's gonna show girls his French flipper trick. I'm still wondering how that works. And then you have the Catwoman side, which is, like, hyper-sexualized, not in an exploitative way, but, like, she's just a very, like, femme fatale, you know, kind of character, wearing the black leather and, you know, being seductive and stuff. And so, you know, you have all these things happening in a Batman movie, which at the time, you know, was something that a lot of people thought about being geared towards kids, which is really funny in hindsight with all of the superhero movies that we've had now and the variety of them. And this might be an underrated take, but I think Danny Elfman's Batman Returns score might be one of the best scores that he's ever made. Like, in not just in Tim Burton's catalog, but in any movie that Danny Elfman has ever scored. I love the Batman Returns score. But anyways, I have a lot of fun with this movie. I enjoy it a lot. There was a time in my life where I thought I liked it more than the first Batman, because I do like the darkness of it. I do like the villains and how they work with against Batman and everything. I think the action sequences are a bit better in this movie. And you see a lot of Michael Keaton as Batman in this movie. Like he's pretty much Batman for most of the film, minus a few small Bruce Wayne segments. I'm a fan of Batman Returns, and I gotta say, after watching his entire filmography once again, I still love Batman Returns, and I still think that I like it just a smidge more than the original Batman. And I know that's probably going to be controversial, and it's probably not going to be the last controversial take that I have on this list, I'm sure. Next up is the movie Ed Wood. And I know exactly where I'm going to rank this right now. I'm telling you guys, Ed Wood is my favorite Tim Burton movie. It is a masterpiece. I think this is an incredible film that I feel like doesn't get enough love as time has gone on. I feel like Tim Burton fans know Ed Wood very well, but as far as like casual fans go, you know, everyone talks about Batman, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, but Ed Wood has kind of been lost a little bit. And I want to say that if you've never seen Ed Wood, I highly, highly recommend that you do. I think it's his best film for many, many different reasons. Ed Wood is technically a biopic about a real director named Ed Wood, who is notoriously famous for making some of the worst movies ever made. He was essentially the Tommy Wiseau of his era, of that time period. He is known prominently for making a movie called Plan 9 from Outer Space, which I guess would be his The Room, that people have watched and commented on. I'm pretty sure Mystery Science Theater covered it. Like, it is one of those movies that is just so goddamn awful that it becomes an absolute joy to watch because of how hilariously bad it is. Ed Wood, as a guy, was trying really hard to make legitimate films. And he was so passionate about the films that he was making. And one thing that I am really drawn to is I like films that are about filmmaking, you know, movies that are about making movies. So I already enjoy that genre very, very much just within itself. But I also really like it because you can tell that Tim Burton, you know, with his themes of being an outcast and being a weirdo and being into things that maybe other people weren't, like sci-fi and monster movies and Godzilla and all of these things that show up in his movies from time to time. You can sense this sort of resonance that he has with Ed Wood, where even though Tim Burton turned out to be way more successful, obviously, than Ed Wood ever was, you know, he appreciates how much of himself that Ed Wood put into these movies. Now, also, Ed Wood himself as a person is a strange man.
I like to dress in women's clothing.
You a fruit?
No, not at all. I love women. Wearing their clothes makes me feel closer to them.
He just liked wearing ladies' underwear and ladies' clothing. That is an aspect of just who he was as a person, and that is also in this movie. The other thing that's really great about it is it shows Ed Wood's dynamic with Bela Lugosi, and how he was an actor that he really looked up to. Obviously, Bela Lugosi played Dracula back in the day, but his career fell into shambles. And at one point, he teamed up with Ed Wood, and he showed up in all of these Ed Wood movies. And then they could put Bela Lugosi on the poster. You know, it was like this legitimate actor that was in it. But at the same time, Bela Lugosi was going through a really, really hard time, not just with his career, but also being addicted to heroin. And being one of the first actors that, you know, kind of came out about it, was outspoken about it, and, you know, checked into rehab and went through all of these really dark places in his life. And Martin Landau, who plays Bela Lugosi in this movie, is just a phenomenal standout. I think he won an Academy Award for it. He does an incredible job. So it's a movie that's a love letter to old school films and filmmaking. It's a movie that's a love letter to a man that tried his absolute best to be a legitimate director. Like, it never worked out for Ed Wood. He's famous for making all these horrible films, but he really, really tried. And he really put his own personality into the movie. And I think that resonates with Tim Burton too, because when you see a Tim Burton movie, for the most part, it looks like a Tim Burton movie. He has his own signature style, signature aesthetic, and he never really shied away from that. And I think that that's a similarity with Ed Wood. But I think the Ed Wood movie has so much heart to it. It has really dark moments. It has really serious moments, but it's also an incredibly funny movie. There's lots of moments to laugh. There's actors that show up in this movie that are just, it's just like a star-studded film too. And every time I watch it, I absolutely adore this movie. It is by far my favorite Tim Burton film. And so for me, it is the top spot of the masterpiece category. So the next movie we get to is Mars Attacks. And what I think is so funny about this is directly after making a movie about Ed Wood, Tim Burton essentially makes his Ed Wood movie. Because Mars Attacks is absolutely the type of movie that Ed Wood would have tried to make. And this is basically a B movie with a star-studded cast. Jack Nicholson, Natalie Portman, Pierce Brosnan. I think Mars Attacks is a ton of fun. I truly enjoy this movie. Some people don't like it because it's so ridiculous, but that's what makes it great. Maybe the only downside of this movie is I think it's the first time that Tim Burton started using CGI, which is not so great for him in the future, you know, in the catalog, but we'll get there when we do. But Mars Attacks is ridiculously hilarious to me. I think it's darkly comedic. Characters die all the time out of nowhere. You do not expect it to happen. It's basically like, that's it. Invaders from Mars, they come down and they just blow the shit out of everybody on Earth. I love all the moments where the characters are like, maybe they're peaceful, maybe they're friendly, maybe they just misinterpreted this. Like they're trying to do all of these little excuses to be like, maybe we'll find some kind of commonality, but the Martians, they're just like, fuck everything. They just come down and they're enjoying it. They're like the Gremlins, you know, or other little monstrous characters that you see in movies that are just having a ball with what they're doing. They're just having so much fun blowing shit up and destroying the planet and killing humans, and it is just hilarious to see the coping of all the human characters trying to figure this out, and the aliens are just having the time of their lives.
Don't run. We are your friends.
I love this movie so much. I think it's a ton of fun. Obviously, it's not a masterpiece, but I do think it's great. I'm going to put it up in the great movie category. I am, man. I know that like there's a lot of people that don't like Mars Attacks, but I think it's so fun. Obviously, nostalgia bias is playing a part here too, but I did just rewatch it, and I was laughing my ass off the entire time. After that, we get Sleepy Hollow, which is another film that I adore. Johnny Depp is the lead character once again. And of course, my forever film crush, Christina Ricci, shows up. Not complaining about that. I think the thing that people forget about when it comes to Sleepy Hollow, though, is that this is a legitimate horror movie. This is rated R. It's very gory. And things that you don't expect to happen, like parents getting beheaded right in front of their child, happen in this movie. And I think that because Tim Burton does a lot of more, I'm not going to say child-friendly, but more like in the PG-13 realm, and he has his gothic style, yeah. But I think Sleepy Hollow was his attempt to legitimately make a horror movie, like going all the way. Like not just doing the gothic aesthetic, not just doing the creepy forest, you know, kind of backdrop that he always does, but really going for it. And he does, and it works. You know, you got the Headless Horseman in there, played by Christopher Walken, which is great. You got witches in here, and it's another one of those movies that has the theme of, you know, Ichabod Crane trying to figure out things with science and people being very superstitious at the time and not wanting him to get involved, not wanting him to dissect the bodies to figure out the cause of death and everything. But at the same time, there are supernatural things happening in the movie. It takes the story of Sleepy Hollow and Ichabod Crane and expands it into a full-fledged, you know, hour and a half, 2-hour movie, whatever it is. I think it does have a lot of intense scenes in it. And actually some pretty good action sequences. I said that Tim Burton's not great at filming action. He's not the best, but there are some sword fights here with the Headless Horseman that are choreographed actually pretty well, like better than the fight scenes in the Batman movies. I am a huge fan of this movie. I think it's great. And again, maybe after, you know, it came out in, I think, 99, so it's been a while. So I think it might be a little underrated at this point. Huge fan of Sleepy Hollow. I'm going to put it up in great movie. And you know what? I'm going to put it above the Batman movies. I'm going to put it above the Batman movies. I think that this is one of his best films. Now, next up is Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes remake. Okay. I know. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I know that a lot of people shit on this movie, and I know that a lot of people hate this film and say, you know, it's the worst Planet of the Apes movie, and it's just atrociously bad. I will not sit here and try to tell you that this is a great movie, all right? But I will say I think that it's better than people give it credit for. I think a lot of people get hung up on the ending. A lot of people get hung up on how it changes things from the original Planet of the Apes. And look, the original Planet of the Apes is a masterpiece. Okay, it is a sci-fi classic that will stand the test of time. It is a amazing movie. I also think all of the recent Planet of the Apes movies are better than this one, right? The trilogy and probably Kingdom also. However, I don't think that this movie is as horrible as people give it credit for. And I think that it does have redeeming qualities. One, of course, is the makeup and special effects. This was Tim Burton's first attempt to do like a really huge, you know, blockbuster kind of movie. I know the Batman movies, yes, but Planet of the Apes feels bigger. You know, it's on a bigger scale, I think. And all of the apes' makeup effects look phenomenal. You got Tim Roth in there as the villain, General Thade, and I always thought Tim Roth was putting in 110% effort playing this character, and I still think so. After rewatching this, his character of General Thade is a great movie villain. All right, I think he's a badass. All right, so if there's any redeeming character, I think it's that character. I think it's Tim Roth playing the villain of this film. I think is good. This is also the first film to feature his longtime wife, Helena Bonham Carter, and it's funny because from this movie all the way to Dark Shadows, she is in every single film, but she first showed up as an ape in Planet of the Apes. So, I don't know, maybe that's something Tim was into. All I'm saying is that I don't think this movie is as bad as people say. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it's an entertaining watch. I'm going to put it up in decent. I'm going to put it up in the decent category for me personally. I don't think that it's that bad. And then we get to Big Fish, which I think is probably Tim Burton's last great movie. Unfortunately for me, I think after Big Fish, he takes a significant downturn in like the quality or at least my enjoyment of these movies and really, really goes downhill, minus a few outliers. But Big Fish, I think, was his last great movie, and it is a heartwarming kind of fantasy film about a man whose father always told him these miraculous stories of things that he did, like encountering a giant and capturing the big fish and everything, and when he worked at the circus and all of these things that he went through. But is it all fantasy, or is it real, or is it a blend of both? And it's an interesting film to look at from that angle. But also, particularly for me, I am a sucker for father-son stories. Yeah, not going to get into that in this video, but my father passed away. And so the ending of this movie really, really hits for me. And I think that overall, I don't know if I would have put this in the great movie category, but the ending of this film is so heartwarming and touching and might be one, like at least top 3 scenes in any Tim Burton movie for me is the ending of Big Fish. You know, take the entire movie is good. It's fine. But the last 10 minutes just is a gut punch, and it's so beautiful though. Like it's sad, but it's uplifting at the same time. And it hits me in the feels every time that I watch it. So for that fact alone, I gotta put Big Fish up in great movie. Okay, so I've praised Tim Burton a lot in this video, but here is where it all goes wrong for me. And I think it truly starts at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. For me personally, I don't like this movie at all. I don't like it. I don't like the look of it. I don't like the color scheme. I don't like Johnny Depp's performance. I don't find it funny. I'm not a fan of this movie at all. And I just rewatched it a week ago, and I tried to like it again because I remembered not liking it. And it has nothing to do with it being a remake or like a different version of the original, you know, with Gene Wilder, because to tell you the truth, I was never a huge fan of that movie either. Like, I watched it as a kid, but I don't have this insane kind of love and admiration for it that I feel like a lot of people do. I think Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I think it's a good movie, but like I'm not in love with it, right? And so that's not where it comes from. I just don't like this film. I just don't like anything about it. I don't enjoy it. I know that a lot of people do also. So this is where I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I am not understanding about this, but I just think it's weird to look at, but not in a good way. Like, It's a different kind of aesthetic than Tim Burton is used to, but there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable, rubs me the wrong way. I just don't like it. I don't like this movie. For me, it's going to go in the ass category. I'm sorry. There's just nothing about this movie that I enjoy. Then next after that is Corpse Bride, which is actually the first animated film that Tim Burton directed, because we're not counting Nightmare Before Christmas. Corpse Bride, I think, is all right. I remember watching it in the theater. I remember liking it okay. I think the biggest problem people have is that they do compare it to Nightmare Before Christmas, which they're completely different movies. And like I said, Tim Burton didn't direct Nightmare. So, you got to take this one for what it is. But I think it's a fun story. I like some of the wacky characters where Johnny Depp's character goes to like the land of the dead and everything. And again, it's a movie dealing with outcasts, which is the heavy theme throughout Tim Burton's work. And I think it's all right. There's nothing about it that makes me love it. I don't think the songs are that great either. I think they're okay. So for me, I guess I'm going to put this in decent, but I'm going to put it in a low decent. I'm going to put it in a low decent for me. I think it's all right, but it's not a movie that I would go back to and rewatch very often. It's just okay. And next is Sweeney Todd. And this is, I feel like I'm going to lose a lot of you guys in the second half because once again, Sweeney Todd is a movie that I don't really care for whatsoever. There are some things about it that I like, but mostly I just find it to be a slog. Like, I find it to be kind of boring, kind of tedious, and I don't like the music. I know that Sweeney Todd is a stage play or a musical or is based on a stage play, but I don't like any of the songs, and none of the songs ever get stuck in my head. With a musical, you want the songs or the music to be the main staple. You want that to tell the story. You want that to be the thing people remember. The only thing that ever gets stuck in my head is Helena Bonham Carter going like, "The worst pies in London." And if that's the only line that gets stuck in my head, I don't know, man. And then it tries to compensate from time to time with, it is an R-rated film, so it does go over the top with some of the violence and stuff, which is fine, which is stuff that I like, but it's just not in a movie that I really care about that much. I'm just not into it. It just doesn't work for me. And I'm sorry, guys, but I just find the movie to be boring. So it doesn't work for me. But I do like it more than Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I guess I'm just trying to decide if I want to put it up in or ass. Because of the aesthetic of the movie, like, he does do a good job with, like, the wardrobe and the costuming and all of that, and the look of the characters, so all right. I guess I'll put it in the category. And then he does it again with Alice in Wonderland. Not a fan of this movie either. I'm sorry. Again, it's similar to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to me, where I just hate the look of it. Maybe it's when Tim Burton decided to use CGI for all of his films instead of practical effects. I don't know what it is. And I don't hate CGI, but sometimes it just rubs me the wrong way. And Alice in Wonderland does that for me. I just hate the way that it looks. I think it looks like barf, and I just don't like the aesthetic whatsoever. I don't like how it feels like every single actor is just standing in front of a green screen. There's nothing to interact with. I don't like the weird CG changes to some of the actors, like Helena Bonham Carter's giant head. Like, I get that maybe it's funny in some way. Just not a fan of it. Again, story of an outcast with Alice, and she has to kind of like rise up and, become who she's supposed to be. And I get that. And the Alice in Wonderland story in itself, like the original Disney movie and like the story, like, it's fine. Like, it's a good story, but I've never been super attached to it in any way. So again, just like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I didn't have any kind of nostalgia bias for the original really that makes me not like it. I just am not a fan of it. And mostly I just think it's a CGI mess with particular Tim Burton alumni doing voices, which again, cool to see Christopher Lee as the Jabberwocky. That's cool. I guess I can put it up in because at least, Mia Wasikowska or whatever her name is, like, she has a pretty good performance in the movie. And at least, you could tell that he was trying, but yeah, it's gonna go there. That's as high as I can put it. And then it doesn't end. It doesn't end because Dark Shadows. I think Dark Shadows is Tim Burton's worst movie. Dude, I cannot stand this movie, man. The only redeeming quality it has is Eva Green. Again, it's a movie that I can't stand the look of it. I don't like the humor of it. I don't find this movie to be funny, like, at all. And I think that's the thing, is like, I can't tell what this movie is trying to be. I can't tell if it's trying to be a comedy and failing miserably, or if it's trying to be a straight up just drama and also failing miserably. A lot of these later performances by Johnny Depp, like early on, like I love, like Ed Wood is my number one, you know, Sleepy Hollow, I like. Edward Scissorhands, he's fine. But this string of movies, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Alice in Wonderland, Sweeney Todd, and Dark Shadows, I just don't, whatever Johnny Depp is doing in all of these movies, I just don't like it. The whole thing with like the vampire, I know this is like a remake of an old TV series as well, so probably has some importance to Tim Burton because of that. He probably grew up watching it, but you know, it's like the fish out of water thing. Like he's a vampire from hundreds of years ago and he's coming here and like he doesn't know what rock music is or Alice Cooper or like the hippie generation and everything. And so there's things that you play, there's ideas that you play with there, but it just does not work for me whatsoever. I'm just detached from it. And I'm detached from this entire era of Tim Burton movies. They just don't land for me like the early ones did. And I just don't like anything about it, really. But then finally, we get to a diamond in the rough, and we have Frankenweenie, which is an animated film, another stop-motion film that he directed, which is actually a remake of a short film that he made before he started making, you know, theatrically released films. He did a live-action Frankenweenie. It's got Shelley Duvall in it, too. It's pretty good. I think it's on a bonus feature if you have the Nightmare Before Christmas DVD or Blu-ray. I think it's a bonus feature on there. So this one I like. This one I like. This one is cute. This one is fun. Again, the themes of science and superstition. There's actually one line in this movie that I love, and I remember from seeing it in the theaters, where the scientist character says about people, you know, they kind of pushed him out because they didn't like the ideas that he was spreading or teaching their kids to question everything, right? And he says one line that I think is really profound, where he says, "People love the things that science gives them, but they don't like the questions that science asks." And I think that that is a extremely profound statement for like a children's film in general, but then also when you just look at humanity, it's absolutely true. This movie has a lot of heart as well. Of course, it's about a young boy whose dog gets run over by a car, and he uses a science experiment similar to Frankenstein to reanimate his dog and bring his dog back from the dead. But there are plenty of consequences that ensue, especially when the other kids get a hold of this technology. You know, you could tell that there's a lot of passion here with Tim Burton because, one, he's remaking a film that he made when he was younger, so there's that. But I'm sure that he feels a lot of connection to the character of, I think, Victor. Victor Frankenstein. Yeah, I think that's the kid's name. And it comes off the screen. Like, you can feel it. You know, whenever a director is really passionate about something, whether it works or not, I feel like you can sense that from the screen itself. And this is one of those movies where I sense that. I think it's a fun film. I'm also really shocked that Disney allowed an animated children's film to be 100% black and white. That actually is really astounding to me, because you would think with children and their attention spans and stuff that the Disney executives would be like, nah, we can't do black and white. But it works for the movie. It works for the aesthetic. It's also kind of a throwback and a love letter to, you know, the classic 30s Universal monster movies and all that. I really like this one. I'm going to say that Frankenweenie is a great movie. Not as good as the other ones, but Frankenweenie is a great movie. There. He redeemed himself in my eyes a bit. Next, we have a movie called Big Eyes, which is another biopic about Margaret Keane, I believe is her name, and the controversy that happened where she would paint these famous photos of children with these big eyes that, you know, you've probably seen just in your everyday travels or seen online. These paintings are very famous. But for many years, her husband took credit for painting them. And after they divorced, she took him to court and she proved that she was the one that made the painting. And it's an interesting story to tell. You know, it was a different time. And Amy Adams is the lead character, and she does a phenomenal job in the movie. But the thing that brings this movie down for me, and it's weird to say this because Christoph Waltz plays her husband, and he is a phenomenal actor. He's won 2 Academy Awards, you know, for the Tarantino movies that he was in. But I don't know what he was doing in this movie, because he is so exaggeratory and overacting in every single scene. I don't know if it was Tim Burton that said, yes, you are playing a cartoon character in this otherwise grounded movie, or if Christoph Waltz just did what he wanted and just was like, screw you, Tim, I'm going to act the way that I want. I don't know why. And like, you know, I don't know if it's just to hammer home the point that his character is an asshole, but his overacting in this movie really takes me out of it. Otherwise, I think the movie is good. Like, I think it's a pretty good film. But Christoph Waltz is just taking it to 11, where everyone else is sitting around a solid 6 or 7 in terms of expressing themselves and expressing their emotions and acting. But Christoph Waltz is like way over the top. He is such an exaggerated character that there are times where I'm like, this movie's working well. And then you get to the courtroom scene where he's like playing the lawyer and himself, and it's just like wacky, and it's like, what are you doing, dude? He's always shouting and like doing, you know, huge movements with his body and everything. Like, he is just like, he is in a stage play, you know, and everyone else is in a movie. I don't know what's going on, but it's the thing that brings it down for me. Otherwise, I think it's decent. I'm going to put it about there. And then we get to his 2 most recent movies, and these ones were actually first-time watches for me. I had never seen either of these 2 movies until literally last night. I watched them back to back. So first-time viewing, blind viewing these movies. First one is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. The movie itself is okay. I could see me watching this maybe if I had some kids or something. Same thing with the next one of Dumbo, but yeah, this one is all right. There's a lot of things in this that are reminiscent of Big Fish, where it's the child's grandfather that was telling him all these miraculous stories, and the kid goes to check it out. And then, of course, he's put into this world where there's all these children that have these fantastical abilities, and Samuel L. Jackson as this Slender Man-looking motherfucker that's trying to eat their eyeballs. I don't really have too much to say about it, other than I just think it's all right. Like, if I had kids, I think this is a movie that I would show them. It does get a little bit dark, a little bit scary, but kids, you know, they need some scary movies too, right? I would say this is a scary movie for kids, because like the monsters, you know, and the creatures, they legitimately look like Slender Man, and they are eating people's eyeballs, which I feel like if you're like 6 or 7 would be pretty damn scary. Otherwise, you know, it's fine. It's okay. I don't really have too much to say about it. Probably not a movie I'll watch again, but it's fine. And then finally we get to Dumbo, the live-action remake of the animated Disney film, which is actually the second one Tim Burton did, if you count Alice in Wonderland. And what do I think about Dumbo? I actually enjoyed it. I actually thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. As somebody who's not particularly a fan of Disney doing all these live-action remakes of their old-school properties, I thought Dumbo was pretty heartwarming. I'm not gonna lie. And I love all the actors that were in it. I thought they did a great job. You got particular alumni of Tim Burton movies like Dane DeVito, Michael Keaton shows up as the villain. Eva Green is in this again. Colin Farrell, I think, does a really good job. And look, is this movie my particular taste and preferences? No. But once again, if I had kids, this is a movie that I would have loved to watch with them. I think that this movie is pretty good for what it is. I think it's a movie. It's got good themes in it as well, about, you know, people struggling together, and again, the outcasts, you know, the carnival people. But also it has messages about animals, not how they should not be in captivity, which is not a movie that I expected about, you know, a movie that's a circus that has trained animals and stuff. So pretty cool theme to kind of throw in there too. Dumbo himself, yes, he's all CGI, but I thought he was very cute, and I thought there's a lot of sad moments too, like when he loses his mom, or when people are making fun of him and stuff. You know, there's a lot of moments where you feel pretty bad. You feel pretty sad for this little silly looking elephant with these giant ears. And I think that everything works well for the climactic moment where you have the carnival troupe kind of rise up and take down this big establishment, you know, which is good. I mean, it's a fun ride, man. I liked it. I can't lie. I did not expect to like it, but I actually did. So for that reason, I'm going to put it up in decent, and I'm going to put it above Planet of the Apes, but not above Edward Scissorhands, which is much, much higher than I thought I would ever rank this movie. But again, saw it for the first time last night. Pleasantly surprised. Okay, guys, sorry, this video probably ran a lot longer than I wanted it to, but also we had 19 movies to get through. That's quite a bit. So this is my ranking of Tim Burton's entire film catalog until Beetlejuice 2 comes out later this year. Again, I know that I probably have some really controversial picks in here and some movies and some spots that people are going to be upset with, but once again, it's just my list and my personal preferences. But there you go, my top favorite Tim Burton movies. So let me know what you guys think down below. Leave all your thoughts, comments, opinions about Tim Burton, his filmography. Go ahead and rank yours or put your top 5, top 10, whatever you guys want to do. I also did make a playlist for my tier list. So if you want to see my rankings of John Carpenter, Sam Raimi, and Wes Craven, I got those on there too. And if there's another director that you would like to see me do a ranking of, put that down below in the comments because I'd love to take this on again. This one took me a long time to rewatch through all the movies, but if we have a director with a smaller filmography, it might not take me as long. But let me know. Let me know what other directors you'd want to see down below. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I deeply appreciate it. I'll talk to you later.